For the Transportation Committee for March 26, 2018. Our first order of business is approval of the agenda, and actually I would like to suggest an amendment to that agenda. I would like to pull our one business item, 2018-56. There's just some more discussion about process that needs to occur before we bring that to the committee, but it should be coming soon. So if there is a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Motion, Madam Chair.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion or changes? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The amended agenda is passed. Next up is approval of the minutes for March 12th, 2018. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved. Next up is employee recognition, Metro Transit.
Yes, Madam Chair, members, do not be intimidated by the size of this stack. It really represents, in many ways, it really takes teamwork to achieve really our day-to-day success at Metro Transit. And that teamwork extends beyond Metro Transit proper. It really involves some great staff support that we've had for a long time with our IS staff. Today, we're going to recognize some staff who've been critical to keeping our technology for fare collection not only working day to day, but with an eye towards the future. And so I want to bring up Nick Buell, who, as you know, is the Senior Manager of Revenue for Metro Transit, and is going to give you a little bit of an overview of the staff that is behind the scenes, but so critical for us.
Yeah, good evening, Madam Chair and Transportation Committee members. As Brian mentioned, my name is Nick Buell. I'm the Senior Manager of Revenue Operations, and as you're aware as well, my responsibilities lie in making sure that our fare collection system allows us to not only distribute fares to our customers, but what's I think more obvious to most folks is to collect those fares from folks. And so I'm happy to be here today to introduce 4 members of our IS team who support Metro Transit's fare collection system. The individuals I'll introduce you to today have been a couple of them have been here since the implementation of the Go-To card, which is probably the most obvious fare collection system we have, but one of quite a few different fare collection systems we support. But they're also key to any expansion, upgrade, and the overall reliability of these systems. And that, for many years, they've supported these systems for Metro Transit, the Council, and the region. And so these are the primary supporters of our Go-To card system, which you're well familiar with, a system that handles over half a million different Go-To cards in use every year and collects about $80 million in annual transit fares. So certainly something that's very important to us. I'd like to first call up Wayne Johnson. Wayne manages the key hardware and network processes that ensure all of the core functions of the Go-To card system are reliable and accessible. Wayne helps ensure that the cubic system stays PCI compliant. PCI stands for Payment Card Industry, and that deals with credit cards, something that we keep our eye on very closely. He manages simultaneous hardware and software upgrades and plans monthly patches. Wayne's always moving with our Go-To card system. As you can imagine, the system that stores credit card information and has people data passing through quite continuously in this ever sort of environment where people are making sure that we're staying compliant and people's data is protected is super critical. And so over the years, Wayne has put in many overnight shifts to keep our system updated. And there's any number of upgrades I could talk about over the last 15 years that Wayne has been part of, but collectively, Wayne is certainly one of the critical pieces of our Go-To card system. The next person I'd like to call up is Mabu Hook. Mabu is responsible for the reliability and the efficiency of Metro Transit's databases, our fare collection databases, which you can imagine hold a lot of data. Those databases get larger every day. We're talking terabytes of data. I mean, we've got like 10 years of data that we hold on to make sure that not only can our customers access it, but we have a number of internal partners that also use that data, including all of the finance team, our service development folks, the folks in customer relations, our police, and any number of stakeholders within Metro Transit and the council access the data. So we need to make sure that it's there, it's reliable, and that we can handle all of that data. So the next person I'd like to call up is Sam Changtum. Sam is responsible for Metro Transit's web store and the payment gateways, and is a key player on all other web development for our Go-To-Card system. He's been a critical piece to numerous and continued Go-To-Card upgrades over the year, including, as I mentioned, our web store, our IVR, and we're working on another upgrade right now that's going to allow our retail and wholesale customers a little bit easier process in terms of going through and ordering fare cards, and then paying any of those invoices associated with those orders. And so I also want to call out, you may be familiar with the iDash project going on right now at Metro Transit, and Sam is also a critical member of that project as well. So he gets his hands in a number of different projects here at Metro Transit. And finally, I'd like to call up Patty Gernbacher. Patty is Metro Transit's application support specialist for the Go-To-Card. Patty provides all of Metro Transit, and really the regional, including the councils, all of the customer reports for the Go-To-Card data, and she supports numerous departments, including not just the finance department, but our marketing department, our service development department, really any department at Metro Transit, Patty is helping support. She's an integral part of the ongoing reliability of the Go-To-Card system. She quickly identifies potential issues through her intimate knowledge of all of the support systems, and she really has a thorough understanding of how all of these processes work. Sometimes Patty will send us an email and say, this is a problem, we need to look at it, and it's something that wasn't even on our radar, and we spend about 10 minutes talking to Patty, and it's like, oh my gosh, we really need to look into this because there's a gap in the system. So just amazing support from all of these folks, and we're really fortunate to have them. I've been in fare collection for a number of years now, and when I go and talk to our peers and go to some of these APTA conventions and look at some of the challenges that these other agencies are having with fare collection, I really feel fortunate because in a lot of ways we have the staff in-house that those agencies don't have, and so we're either really good at heading off those issues before they become problems, or being proactive so we can identify them, ahead of us and really make the decisions beforehand so that we can steer clear of those and keep these systems running efficiently and effectively for our customers. And so, as I mentioned, I could pull any one of the projects we've had over the last 10 to 15 years, out, and where these folks could be recognized, but certainly collectively, they really are key to all of our fare collection systems. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here today to recognize them. Thank you.
I'm coming. Just a burden.
Heavy.
You guys, you're all color coordinated. Is that on purpose? All right.
Here's Sam's.
One guy's family. That's really
Patty, congrats. Mrs. Wayne.
There's a family member there who can get a picture. There's a family member with a camera if you want to pose for a picture so she can get a better picture. Do you want to take a better picture? Oh, okay. Well.
Do you want me?
Yeah. Okay. Don't you think?
Want me in there too?
Sure.
Get to pay
She's like
extra.
trying to get pictures of like their back and everything.
Maybe the light outside is good. Madam Chair, just to show that we can dual task, I would like to continue on. We also have someone from our bus maintenance side that we'd like to recognize, but also in a related field, because in order for us to really efficiently and effectively manage our system, we need to be able to manage data, and we really are very fortunate that we have talented but also insightful people in all parts of our organization. I'm going to bring up Abel Mumby, who's going to introduce someone from our bus maintenance side.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to Thank you for giving us opportunity to be able to recognize our employees. With me is Adam Shirak. Adam is a bus maintenance business analyst, and the position that he's held since May of 2011. Adam is being recognized for developing a paperless application that allows us to efficiently process road call information and also for migrating reports from a system that at a time was not supported to a system that we currently support in bus maintenance. Um, just giving you a picture of the system that we Adam's application when Adam developed the new application allows us to be able to process the road calls within the application, be able to communicate with TCC, and also to be able to save the document electronically. And the reports that he migrated moved us from a situation where we had to rely on a PC in our work area to be on to generate automatic reports to where the system is automated, runs on the server, and that makes us be more efficient in what we do. Madam Chair, again, I'm brief, but thank you for giving me the opportunity to acknowledge Adam's work, and thank you to everybody.
Congratulations. Okay, next up is the TAB Liaison report from the March 21st, 2018 meeting.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Transportation Committee, General Manager Lamb, and Director Thompson. Apologize for my voice, and I'm sitting over here not because I don't like you, but I don't want to give you my cold. The first item, the TAB Chair presented information to the TAB membership on governance proposals regarding the Met Council, which I'm sure you're familiar with. The most visible is the Metro Governance Transparency Initiative. MnDOT reported, as Tony Fisher will bring you today, on the corridors of commerce. In the TAC report, first, there were two scope change projects that you may want to be aware of. First, in Member Latovsky's District 8, the North Loop Pedestrian Enhancement Project was passed with a scope change and no reduction in federal funds. TAB member and Minneapolis Council member, Mr. Wright, gave testimony that it was the same project, but more could be done with more city funds. And Member Latovsky, as I'm sure you're aware, it's generally in the area of 2nd Street North and 7th Avenue North. The next scope change project is under the tutelage of Councilmember Barber, because there was a lot of community input on this. This is Prior Lake, Highways 21 and 13, expanding the project to include, based on community feedback, to include or to change from intersections to roundabouts. And TAB member and Scott County Commissioner Ulrich said that it was a great deal of community discussion, as I'm sure you know, and that's what the citizens wanted. But an element that I think you're no doubt aware of, but hopefully if you don't mind repeating it, is that the scope change policy is mandated by federal rules for any money that's given to through the regional solicitation. And the purpose is to ensure that the projects meet the project standards, but also the intent of the original application, and that will come up a little bit later. Federal rules require that if the project or cost is substantially changed, it must go through formal review and a TIP amendment. On the plus side, the scope change policy allows sponsors to adjust projects to unforeseen circumstances while producing the same benefits. However, in reviewing this, the key is what is substantially changed and what is intent of the original application. And to that point, under Director Thompson and the chair of TAB, Chair Rodriguez, there's a working group being formed of TAB staff and TAC to determine how to evaluate this. Is it a rescoring mechanism, or is it, do they work out with MnDOT whether this is a scope change or administrative change? Excuse me. New members of the TAC from Chair Rodriguez's district is Ken Ashfield of Maple Grove. He's the Director of Public Works and the City Engineer of Maple Grove. And from Councilmember Rummel's district is Ann Kane of White Bear Lake. She's the Director of Community Development. The Another item that was brought up were project deferrals, again, from plan years 2019 to 2020. Again, as you know, the tab customarily over programs, funds, which if you, is a polite word for overbooking, to allow for scope changes, project withdrawals, or coming in on the budget and additional federal money. The federal regulations allow the TIP to overprogram except in its first year, so which would be 2019. It's a 2019-2023 TIP. The TIP was overprogrammed by 6.6 million, and MnDOT and MTF staff went for volunteers based on if they delayed to 2020, they would get reimbursement faster, and if they could advance and construct in 2019, they could be reimbursed in 2020. The first one is Councilmember in Commerce District. The Dale Street I-94 interchange deferred until 2020 for $6 million. Councilmember Elkins, the East Bloomington Freeway sidewalk project of $567,000 was deferred to 2020, and then Dakota County, $36,000 for retiming. And to save the best for last, because Mac always has some great anecdotes, which I find interesting. But Councilmember, or Tab Member Crimmins reported that in the 24 hours after Super Bowl, they broke the record of passengers with 60,000 compared to the record of 47,000. And spring break will bring an average of each start of a spring break will bring about 48,000 passengers. And he also informed us that there is apparently an agreement among the school districts or the educational system that in spring break, secondary goes first, then high school, then elementary. So it doesn't put too much of a strain on the transportation system. And the post-Super Bowl temporary walls are going back up as construction has returned for the second year in a row. Our airport was voted best in its size, and we had 3 concessions that were voted best in class. And he also wanted everyone to know that although MAC has taxing authority, has not used it, and all revenues, according to federal regulations, must go back into the facility. Any questions, Madam Chair or members? Otherwise, thank you.
Other questions from committee members?
Kim,
Councilmember Dorfman.
Yes,
When
ma'am.
you were
Yes, madam.
talking about the staging, phasing, maybe I didn't understand it, around the schools from high school to middle to elementary.
That's what the
Is it-
council member said. So
What does that mean, though? Is that in terms of when they actually get spring break?
I think so. I mean, because
So I've heard a bunch of parents complain, if I'm interpreting this correctly, I think it's what I've heard parents complaining about, because you could have a child in high school, in middle school, and in elementary, and then when you try to take your family vacation around spring break, it gets really difficult.
that's really interesting. You're right. Wow.
So I was surprised to hear that they do that.
Yeah, I'm not. Well, we'll find out and we'll report back. I'm not sure where it comes from.
Probably
either.
not a Met Council issue.
No, probably not. But gee, it's fun. But thank you, Madam Chair.
Are there any further questions? Thank you, and feel better.
Thank you. I will. Thank you.
Next up are reports. MTS Director Thompson.
Madam Chair and members, last week, as you probably saw, the federal budget was approved. We're expecting that'll actually have a positive impact on transportation funding in Minnesota. In addition to funding the Transit Capital Investment Grant Program, which would be a source of funds for Southwest LRT and Orange Line, there were increases in formula highway funding, so there'll be some additional highway funding for the state. And they funded pretty large increases in some of the competitive grant programs like Tiger. And then they created a new competitive grant program around highway bridges that Minnesota will be eligible for. It's pretty early in the process, but a lot of these grant programs we expect to have a pretty tight deadline. So we'll be watching that closely to see if there's opportunity to fund some of the priorities in the region here. At the state level, we've passed last week the first deadline for bills. Many of the bills remain active around governance, a lot of transit reporting and operations reporting. Haven't heard much around bonding proposals. The bill that the task force recommended from the Metro Mobility Task Force around data sharing with DHS remains active. We're expecting that that'll be heard again in the Senate this week, but it's had several stops. It's went through many different phases. A lot of around that bill is about whether the customers would opt into sharing their data or opt out of sharing their data. And we think the current status of the bill would allow us to effectively manage what the Metro Mobility Task Force recommended. So we're hoping that the bill passes in its current form. TPP was presented to TAB last week in their info session in advance of them next month asking for their approval to forward it to this committee for release to the public. And then we have our hopefully last meeting scheduled April 19th with Hennepin County to present to them. That meeting has been moved several times, but we're currently on the morning of the 19th. And so if you haven't received that notice, let me know. We'll make sure you're there. So, and our other two things we're working on are TBI and Quarters of Commerce, and they're both on the agenda today. So I'll defer to that. And that concludes my presentation. Be open to questions.
Thank you. Are there questions from committee members? Actually, I have a question. My memory is the Tiger grant was increased by about 50%. Is that right? Did it go from $1 billion?
Madam Chair, it's the phrase I heard was it was tripled to 1.5, but I believe it was also the release I saw was in the transit category. But the Tiger has always been more multimodal, so it's one of those that I need to dig into the details. Okay. But it was significantly increased. So.
Okay. Thank you.
The last round of Tiger, there was no Tiger funds in Minnesota, so hopefully we're a little more. That counts in our favor this time around for receiving funds.
Very good. Thank you. General Manager Lamb.
Yes, Madam Chair. Members say our transit technician training program was recognized as one of the best examples of innovation in Minnesota state government last week. The program was one of the three initiatives celebrated by Mark Dayton's Better Government Awards. And as you recall, this training program puts job seekers with little or no experience on a path towards full-time career opportunities. And so the first group is scheduled to actually graduate this year. And right now, I think we have about 15 candidates in that group. The second group is pursuing. The first group was on the bus side. The second group is on the rail side, and the third group is enrolling school now, and will begin working in our garages later this year. And actually, we've been invited to make presentations at both the APTA Bus and Rail Conference regarding this program, so that potentially it can replicate this model throughout the country. Second of all, the Sea Line groundbreaking. I want to thank Council Members Rodriguez Schreiber as well as Latowski for attending the groundbreaking. It was really a snowy but fun morning celebration, and we had an enthusiastic turnout to the groundbreaking, but also later in the week we had an open house, or in the week that we had an open house for residents to learn more about the project and related construction impacts. And staff were able to talk about the project over the weekend at Northside Housing Fair at the Lucy Laney Elementary School. Residents are being encouraged to stay up to date by signing up for an email construction notices, visiting our website, and calling the construction hotline. We'll also be hosting community construction meetings on the second Wednesday of each month at UROC. Road construction will begin on the south end of the corridor and generally move north through the fall. Penn Avenue will be rebuilt from sidewalk to sidewalk between Lowry and Broadway. Several intersections will also see major reconstruction efforts. Traffic will continue to be able to cross Broadway at each major street throughout the construction. We'll begin building the Sea Line stations on 7th Street in downtown Minneapolis soon. Additional station construction efforts will follow the roadwork on Penn Avenue. And finally, this has been, as you know, we're up to a really good start in terms of special event-related ridership. Each of the last 2 weekends have had busier than usual traffic, 43,000 additional rides over and above what we normally would experience on Saturday, St. Patrick's Day. as our part of our Miller Coors partnership, and that's represents about 26% increase over normal ridership. And while we don't have final numbers, we also know that more than 20,000 people gathered this weekend for the in St. Paul for the march, and many of them got there to and from on our trains and buses. So we'll get that number and relay that on to you when those numbers are finalized. And of course, that already builds on a very successful but busy first part of the year with Super Bowl and other related activities. And so in all of that activities, both street operations as well as our transit police have reported no major disruptions despite that activity level. So with that, Madam Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments for General Manager Lamb? I did want to recognize that Councilmember Dorfman was also at this evening.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm
I
sure.
apologize. I did see that.
So next up is information items, public art program update, and Mark Granlund is here to present.
Hi. Madam Chair, committee members, I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to update you on the public art transit program at Metro Transit. Just to give you a little context, Metro Transit has a collection of public art that's 70 plus artworks, or I'll say sites. We have something like Fairview Station, LRT station, which is considered one piece. But while you're there, there's actually 8 different mosaics throughout the platform. But the platform and the station itself is kind of considered an artwork. So Metro Transit has 70 public artworks made out of as many as 403 individual pieces. So it's an extremely large public art outdoor collection. It compares to the other largest collections in the state, which are Minneapolis has about 64. This is growing, of course. They add some every year, but they have about 64 public artworks. St. Paul has about 84 public artworks, and the state of Minnesota has maybe the largest with 100 plus, but most of those are indoors. They're not the outdoor public art kind of collections. So we have a very large collection, a lot of diversity to it, mosaics, metal sculptures, bronze sculptures, wood, all kinds of different media. And then it really started in earnest with the Blue Line, with the oldest of the works that we have now being 15 years old. It wasn't until October of 2016 that Metro Transit decided to create the public art administrator position and hire someone, which was me. So 2017 is the first full year of the public art in transit program. And so I'm giving you an update on that first full year of the program. So we had conservation treatments at several locations last year. I'm going to highlight 2 of them in this presentation. The first one is at Cedar Riverside Station, and it's Dancing Mill City by Aldo Moroni. It's these brightly colored, whimsical building shapes that are on the dividing fences in the middle of the platform. These are photographs from when it was installed 15 years ago. But over time, you can see some of these pieces started to rust. Some had parts that got bent. The fence that they were on, even though the fence is not technically part of the public art piece, was starting to show wear and tear. It was unpainted galvanized metal, but where there was welds, it was painted over, and things are just becoming very uneven, a little rusty, not looking so good. So we removed the 62 individual pieces of metal from the fencing. We took them to a paint factory. We had them stripped down to bare metal to remove all the rust. We did a zinc primer coat, and then 2 coats of color on top of that to come up with our yellow, blue, and red shapes. Interesting part of this project was that the red, yellow, and blue are the colors of Metro Transit's logo, our official colors. But these were the colors from 15 years ago. We've changed slightly over the years. So we actually had to match, to be true to the original piece, we had to match the colors from 15 years ago to a visual match to get that correct. And once they were painted, they were put back up on the fences and looked like this. Much brighter, much more enjoyable to look at. A second project that worked on last year quite a bit was Landscape of Memories at the VA Medical Center station. Now, this is a little bit off the platform. It's not on the platform. It's to the north side of the platform on a grassy area where people can sit and wait for the train. And, if people have been in the VA center and they're dealing with stuff, they can sit quiet for a little bit and stuff. But this piece, see if I can go back. This consists of a wooden bench that over the last several years was starting to deteriorate, rot, freeze thaw, ice sitting on top of the bench this time of year, like right now, led to deterioration of the bench. We also have some stone steps that are there, and they got covered with grime and biofilms and algae and other things, as well as getting tagged. So the project, we cleaned the steps, had them re-caulked. 90% of the caulking between the stone steps was either loose or missing. So we had that completely re-caulked. And then the bench was a little more of a project. How do you take a wooden bench? This is Port Orford cedar, so it doesn't tend to rot, but it was having its issues. So, and this wood only comes from the Pacific Northwest coast. So to recreate this somehow would be extremely difficult to do. But we started out by removing all of the rotting areas in the softwood. As you can see here, the top of the bench, you can see those big gouges in it. That's how much rotting wood was in it. And then they burned the wood to seal it. And then we taped the ends and started taking off the rot on the ends. You saw the moss that was growing in it earlier. Here's an image of the top. Now after it's been taken care of, sanded down, burnt, and all the bad stuff removed. And then you can see that there's some plates that we put on there because we discovered that the bottom side of the bench was actually in really good condition. So we flipped the bench over. So here's the process of flipping it over. And once you get it over, this is what it looked like as soon as we flipped it. So you can tell that the surface is much, much better than what it had been before. So you take that surface and you sand it down and stain it, and you have this really nice looking bench. Worked on the ends a little bit more. We had to fill in some places and do some extra staining there, but ended up matching it pretty well. And you can see on the ground there, you see the landscape edging right there. That was positioned so that actually was right in the middle of your feet, of your arch of your foot when you're sitting on the bench. And it was a little too close to the bench and to the stone steps, so there was damage from lawn mowing. So we ended up moving that out further to protect the pieces. And so here you see the landscaping and the clean stone. So this was before, and this was after. So big improvement, big change, much cleaner, much nicer area to sit and listen. You can also see a little bit in this photo, just in front of the steps, there's two curved arcs in the turf, and there's one in front of the bench there. And those are 3 bronze arcs that were over time covered by the grass and everything, so we had to locate them and find them and raise them up again so that we could see them. So those are the 2 big projects that happened last summer, or this last year. And then a surprise to me, which was really fun, was that I was also involved in 13 community partnerships and temporary projects. So when I interviewed for the job and everything, I didn't even realize how much community interaction there was on these temporary type of projects. So, and the picture here is of a dragon that was put out there at the Nicollet Garage for the summer for a while by the community, the neighborhood community. 2 projects that are started in 2017. We're hoping to finish up in 2018. One is the Small Kindnesses, weather permitting. I don't know if you've been on some of the Blue Line stations, and they have these interactive boxes with audio and video on them. They tell stories. There's 100 stories on each one that were generated by a call to artists and storytellers in the Twin Cities. Well, the technology is getting old. So the image on the right is the Firefly media player. That's getting old. It's actually, some of this stuff is so old that our technology isn't completely digital. It actually has some moving parts in it still. So we're trying to upgrade that and make it workable, also easier to maintain. so that if we need to change anything, I can just take a laptop, go out, and upload or download things. Right now, you have to remove things from the platform and take care of things. We're also cleaning up all the boxes and making them look spiffy. That one in particular, with the curtains that open and close when you activate the little lever, we had new curtains made for it. They were looking a little ratty after 15 years. So. And then another one that we started working on is Hennepin Avenue Warehouse District Station. You can see the low wall has those small little tiles of those historic photographs. There's 200 of those tiles in the piece, but 52 of them were damaged and vandalized by somebody, and it looks like they just did the same thing 52 times, all probably in one day. That person moved on, and hopefully will never return. But we're getting those tiles remade. And that's an interesting process. The original tiles are red clay tiles, so they're kind of a soft clay, so it's easier to damage them. So we're going with a sturdier, stronger tile this time. And the technology on doing these decals that you end up putting on the tile and then in the kiln you fuse it to the tile, that technology has changed so much that the people who are doing this work are actually figuring out that they're having to degrade their system and the image to match what used to be done 14, 15 years ago. Because the idea, again, is restoration. So we're trying to match what was there so nobody knows that there's any difference. So it's been interesting going out and testing the tiles and make sure that they don't look quite so crisp and clean and nice as they can do, which is they want to do. But it's like we're asking them to not be quite that way. A couple of projects, big projects going on in 2018. On the left, you see some mosaics at Snelling Station. We have 5 different stations where we have mosaics that there were anti-graffiti coatings put on a few years ago, and it wasn't the best anti-graffiti coating to put on. It tends to collect dirt. Once there's a break in the surface, the water gets behind it, and it starts peeling away. And so our mosaics aren't looking as good as they could be. There's a much better product out there. So we're going to have all of that anti-graffiti covering removed and then replaced with the proper covering. And so you're going to see these mosaics actually brighten up once that happens, which is kind of exciting to see. The other item is we're trying to figure out what to do with all of our glass art. We have quite a bit of glass art. Some of it's been damaged by those nice big rocks that we have in the rail bed, kids throwing them. So we're trying to figure out what to do with the canopy at Cedar Riverside and how to maintain that. There's 40 panels of glass with constellation designs on them. There's 4 different designs. Each of the designs is a view of the constellations from 4 different cities: Minneapolis, Oslo, Ho Chi Minh City, and Mogadishu. So all cities where people from that neighborhood have come from, and so it's seeing the same constellations from the 4 different places on the planet. So it's kind of a cool canopy and idea. So we're trying to keep that while maybe rethinking using glass or thinking of ways to help prevent vandalism of the glass. So other accomplishments that have happened and are happening: public art and transit guidelines are just about approved. Coming to you soon, Brian. So we're very close to having guidelines for project managers when there's public art funding on how to actually go about engaging the public, how to go about hiring artists, how to go about the whole process so that when you have the public art and it's complete and it's on site, it's easy to maintain, it looks great, it reflects the neighborhood. It's just a really good quality piece of public art. So that's exciting to get that completed. Standardized title plaques. So blue line, green line, built at different times. The title plaques on the platforms were different information, different look, different styles, different sizes. So standardize those so that all the plaques look the same and will be the same going on out. And then 2 last items I want to talk about a little bit. One is a public art impact survey that I did last summer, and then new content and images for our public art web pages. So the first one, we did a public art impact survey where we had 15 questions. The first questions were demographic questions and all that kind of stuff. And then we had 10 questions about the public art collection. And this went out to go-to card holders and was also put out on our social media. So people were responding online. And we had just under 1,500 people respond to the survey. So I'm just going to cover just a few questions from the art questions because it's good information to have. Um, First question to go over, have you noticed the public art at the LRT station? 77% of the people responded yes, that they have noticed the public art there. Of the 23%, some of them responded, I didn't know it was art, I just thought it was the design of the station. So at least those people too notice something's going on. They know that it's not just a regular old uh, station that's utilitarian. Another question, did you know that Metro Transit has more than 70 pieces in its public art collection? 14% said yes, which I'm really excited about. That 14% of the people knew we had that large a collection. So, and this is a question when we do this survey again in 2019, it'll be interesting to see how these answers change at that time with all the education and interpretation that we're doing too. How important is Metro Transit public art to your overall riding experience? If you take moderately important, important, and very important, that's 71% of the people responded favorably, that it is somewhat or moderately important to them, or very important. So that's a really good indicator. And then how does having a public art collection affect your impression of Metro Transit? Well, 68% of people said absolutely more positive, which is great, and only 4% said more negative. So it's very low negative impact, and I assume most of that has to do something about spending money and priorities. So, another question: how well does the public art relate to the community and the neighborhood? Somewhat or very well ended up being 90% of those people responding. So that's really insightful, especially the fact that the blue line with the older art, some of the neighborhoods are starting to change around the stations. But it's nice to know that the art still relates to what's going on in the area. And that'll be interesting to watch too as we do the survey again down the road, how that answer changes. And then finally, would you like to see public art at future LRT stations and transit centers? And 85% of the people responded yes. So now we got to find money. And then we had an open-ended question. Do you have a story about one of the pieces in Metro Transit's collection you'd like to share? 62 people responded with a little story. And 3 of those here I'd just like to share. I enjoyed the stories and songs on the wind-up machine at Port Snelling Station while it poured rain. I sat there for a long time late at night, waiting until it was dry enough to go to my car. The stories kept me company. Some art, for example, at the Fairview Green Line station, helps me appreciate the neighborhood's history. I love the variety of art subjects. And last, I am at the 46th Street LRT station almost every day. And there is something about that turtle on the southbound platform eve that just makes me smile. It's a bit of whimsy in a typically utilitarian way. All right, so a big thing that's happening this week, we're rolling out all new public art web pages on the Metro Transit site. In the past, there were web pages that were really hard to find about the public art, and they would have a simple description and 2-3 photos of the piece. It was there, it was nice, it was there, but we can do a lot better. So this week, someday this week, we're rolling out new information on these public art pages where I added 350 to 400 new photos to what was there. So there's going to be 500 photos of the artworks and other things there. So that's right, I have images to show you. So here's the new landing page. We're actually going to have an interactive map where you can hover over the station and the little image that shows the public art. And then you can click on that and go to the information about the public art. We're also on that landing page, which we don't have a landing page now for the public art. It'll take you with links to the Blue Line collection, the Green Line collection, and then artwork at transit centers and at the North Star stations where we have them. We'll also have links to temporary proposals, temporary public art proposals, if you want to do those. And then eventually, not right away, but eventually here, I'm going to get that survey information up on the web pages so people can see the results of that. So then if you go to the Green Line, like if you click on the link to the Green Line collection, you'll come to the Green Line page, and you can see all the stations listed at the bottom in green, of course, with a little image of the artwork behind there. And when you hover over it, that image of the artwork becomes clear, the green goes away, and you can click on that station and go read about the artwork there. So this is Capitol Rice Street Station. So just a typical one now. We have, the artist listed. We have a description of it. We have material listed. And then there's 4 tabs on each of these pages. So the default tab is the images. So you see a lot of color, a lot of imagery of the public art piece. So you can identify it. This is it. If you go to the story tab, this is the background information about what went into the piece. So at Rice Street Station, it's all about the Minnesota Bill of Rights. And so here's a listing of the 8 sections of the Bill of Rights that are represented on the station. Next tab, you go to the artist. You can learn about the artist. You can have a link to their webpage if they have one. You can see an image of a different piece that they've done somewhere else. And then finally, a tab for archives. So there's different things that are in this archive tab. This one shows the process of these being fabricated at the factory. So you see them in their raw metal form. You see the design concept. You see them with the images printed on them. So other archive tabs talk about ice palaces at the Winter Carnival, because the piece at Robert Street is all about the ice palaces from the late 1800s. We have at 10th Street Station, it's all about the River Warren and the giant, I don't know if you knew, but there's a giant waterfall almost as big as Niagara Falls here in St. Paul many years ago, long before I was alive. And so that station is about that waterfall and everything there. And so there's history and archival stuff. Sometimes there's concept drawings and sketches that were presented as part of the original process, things like that. So just a whole lot more information, a whole lot more interesting facts and ways to bring people into the collection to realize what it's really about. It's really about presenting the neighborhood, about presenting our communities. It's about reaching out and giving people a better experience of riding through our geographic space and understanding more about it. So that's my update. If you guys have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Councilmember Dorfman.
Madam Chair, a couple things. Thank you for that presentation. Thank you for doing this job. I have always felt that public art is a really critical piece of our public infrastructure, and the survey that you took supports that as well. So 2 questions. Since Hiawatha was the first effort to do a lot of this public art, when those pieces were, when the artists were identified and it was constructed at each of the stations, was there detailed information or direction that went with that talked about maintenance and colors? I mean, I'm thinking there must have been, since for the Aldo Moroni, you used the original colors. I mean, is there stuff written down so 10 years from now somebody can't decide to paint those pink and purple instead and things like that?
Yeah. Madam Chair, Member Duffman?
Dorf, thank you.
Yeah, part of big task of mine for the last year or so, and I'm still working on it, is pulling together all the files, all the information, looking through file cabinets, finding Tupperware bins that are in deep storage somewhere, pulling things out, and scanning documents is actually a lot of what I've been doing this winter, and putting it all together. And with the Blue Line, of course, it's older. Some of the documents are harder to find. I actually have a lot more printed documents from the Blue Line, and from the Green Line, I have much more digital documents. And so it's a matter of I'm just going through and collecting and putting it all in place so whoever comes after me doesn't have to do that same kind of thing, and putting as many directions as possible in there on how to go
That's
about
great.
doing the things that.
Well, and then along those lines, my request, if you haven't already done it on the website, is that there also is a short section about the history of developing the public art on Hiawatha, and mentioning Joan Mondale, who led that project, and it wouldn't have happened, I think, without her. And so I hope we reflect that on the website as well.
Are there other questions? I thought I saw one hand. Councilmember Latovsky.
I think I know the answer to this, but I sort of wonder why. It looks like we only have public art on the train platforms. Is that right?
Yeah, well, Councilmember, Madam Chair, Councilmember Latovsky, most of the work is on the platforms of the light rail line. We have at two stations of North Star, Target Field Station and then Big Lake, so at the two ends. And then we have a couple transit centers. And then also in this collection, on the web pages, when you go through it, you'll see some that are on our property, but we don't own them and we're not responsible for them. So there's Franklin Avenue Bridge has some murals on it. We have a few other pieces other places.
So then I just wonder if, like part of the Orange Line, some of these larger BRT projects might be able to integrate, or is the plan to integrate some public art into those as well?
Yeah, we've been, again, it's funding and how to generate that funding, but I've been very involved in looking at partnerships. And so there's community and neighborhood organizations in those areas that want to have something. So it's talking with them, working with them, figuring out how that can integrate. Um, and it's a slower process, and we're digging around and trying to make it work, and figuring out what the best way to do this new way of doing it. We've kind of been used to having federal funding. Just here you go. Here's a big chunk along with your station, But now we're having to be a little more creative, a little more digging around and finding partners and seeing what we can do, and maybe not having this big, gigantic process either that's so big and involves the station and everything, but more of really being site specific, working with neighborhood groups and others.
So is-
Councilmember Latovsky.
Thanks. So specifically then the Lake Street Station with the 35W and Lake Street project on the Orange Line, does that come up at all? Is that part of the conversation?
Yeah, Madam Chair and Member Latovsky, we've been talking with Lake Street Council and others in the area, and then also City of Minneapolis is doing its own public art project that goes from the Green Line up to Lake Street along 35W. So I've been talking with them too about, well, how does this, this leads right up to our station. So how do we somehow take that station and incorporate it and figure out things? And is that a matter of maybe we come up with some money and we try to match something, or do they have funds that can extend? We've kind of designed the Lake Street station underneath the underneath part so it can receive art at some point. We try to think ahead so that the way that facade is made on both sides, it can be attractive if it doesn't have art on it, but once there's an opportunity that we could put art on it, and so we are looking at all these kind of partnerships and questions, and Lake Street is on the radar.
Thanks.
Councilmember Dorfman.
So the connection between, I think that's care of the Lake Street and the Midtown Greenway, that Green Crescent.
Yes.
There it was a committee with the city, and we've already identified an artist to do a project along that. So that's happening.
Are there any further questions?
So,
Councilmember Dorfman.
what you said, so there was a committee looking at public art that along Southwest LRT, and as you point out, there's no money, and so that there are no plans right now that I know of to do anything similar to what we did on Hiawatha or along Central in terms of public art for Southwest.
Madam Chair and Member Dorfman, we are working with Forecast Public Art,
Right, but
with places, and so each of the cities along the Southwest rail line are looking at fundraising to raise $5 million to include public art around the station area.
not in the stations, so not
But
as
it won't
part of
be,
the stations.
yeah, it won't be on the platforms. But at this time, we're looking at that there's still public art as part of the experience of taking transit into there. It'd be nice if it's on the platform, but the way the funding
Right.
fell out during that whole process, it just limits that. So.
I have one suggestion. Do we give do we give tours to groups? And I'm thinking school kids, even high school art classes, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts. Do we do that? I mean, 70 public art projects is really impressive.
Madam Chair, we are discussing I mean, I'm just getting the information out there. But we have talked about, hey, this could be an art tour. I mean, maybe as you're going from station to station, there's something you can listen to on your phone. Maybe there's information. Obviously, you can pull up the web pages, but there's, so we've kind of gathered the information, packaged it so they can get out there. So now the next thing is to figure out ways that people can tie into it. So that is one of the things we think.
Okay, it'd be great to provide tours, and the ending picture for the little kids on the steps would be a nice touch. Anyway, thank you. Any further questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next is the 2018 Twin Sales and Marketing. Bruce Howard and Kelsey Stones is here. Or maybe just Bruce?
Well, good afternoon, Madam Chair and members. I'm Bruce Howard, Director of Customer Services and Marketing at Metro Transit, and just getting in the spirit of the Twins a little bit here since it's opening week in Major League Baseball. The Twins are going to open up their season in Baltimore on Thursday, and then they'll be home on April 5th for the home opener. Hopefully the weather will warm up a little bit by then. But we've got an important partnership to talk about here, and that is our partnership with the Minnesota Twins. A couple of things that are important for us, of course, is one, we get to introduce customers to transit services that perhaps might not otherwise look at taking transit. And secondly, we play a very critical role in moving hundreds of thousands of people into and out of this setting for urban ballpark here. So with that, let me start by providing a brief overview of our service. Service is essentially the same as we've had the last few years. Light rail, our blue and green line, will be the workhorse for providing rides to Target Field, and we provide service roughly every 10 minutes on game day to and from the stadium. North Star will continue to serve each of the home games, and we're going to be marketing in that corridor to promote the special trains that we have. As you know, we can serve some of the games with the existing service that we have, and some of the games we need to add a train that comes in right before the game and then stays till a half hour after the game and gets people home that way. We have 13 bus routes that serve the neighborhood, and several more that connect throughout the system with the blue and the green line, including the A line, of course, so people can get a quick ride in to the stadium. The one thing that we are adding for this year is Route 535 from our Knox Park and Ride down in Richfield. We're going to be adding weekend service to that, so that'll be a nice feature for people down in that area who want to get into the games. Of course, this summer we have Stage 2 construction going on 35, so hopefully we're going to be able to promote taking transit in to the stadium with the new 535 weekend service. And of course, the Metro Transit app will be available to plan your trip, to look at the times of exact departures, and then also to buy mobile tickets as well. In terms of a ridership review in 2017, we provided 522,000 rides to and from the stadium. As you see here, rail was the bulk of that, bus significantly less, and I'll talk a little bit about that in just a minute. Our 2018 ridership goal, we want to increase our event pass sales. That's one of the things we want to focus on. For example, we have a North Star family pass where you can bring 2 adults and up to 3 children for $25 round trip from Big Lake. So we think that's something that we want to continue to promote and do an even better job of doing that. You can buy the family pass through our online ticketing service. We have all-day passes and others that you can buy from TVMs, and of course our mobile app as well. And then in terms of our ridership, we're going to continue to build ridership. We hope to surpass that 522,000 ride figure that I mentioned there, and we want to build our mode share from 12% up to 13%, and I'll show another chart here in just a minute on that. Here's a look at how the ridership breaks down by mode, and you can see here, as I mentioned, light rail service is the vast majority of that, of the blue line and the green line at the top. We include both the 2017 and 2016 numbers here. North Star provided 71,966 rides in 2017. And now on the bus side, as I was mentioning, a couple of notes on that. You can see there, first of all, that bus ridership is down from 2016, and this really reflects the fact that we had to end our Route 679 service, our Minnesota Twins Express service that we ran from the County Road 73 Park and Ride. It was just one of those things where that ridership had declined since it started. We were up near 100,000 rides with that in 2010. And in 2016, we had only about 26,000 rides on that. So it just didn't make sense to keep offering all that service for that number of rides. And part of the issue there, I think, is you'll see here in a minute, I can show you that now, that the Twins attendance has declined since the stadium opened there in 2010. A slight bump up in 2011, but since then it has significantly declined, almost a million fan difference there between 2011 and 2016, and a lot of that then affected our ridership on the 679. And also a kind of a double whammy, I'd say, is that as there were fewer people attending, then there became more parking too around the stadium, and I think that hurt us a little bit as well. So that was one of the reasons that we discontinued the 679. The other thing I wanted to mention just on the bus ridership is we know that we're undercounting our bus ridership here. We actually go out and count people who are taking the bus into the stadium at 3 locations closest to the stadium. So at our 5th Street garage, where we have several routes that terminate there, on 7th Street, and then there's another one that I'm forgetting off the top of my head. But those 3, we actually have people out counting, and so we know that those people are actually going to the game. Now, we know other people take transit bus into downtown Minneapolis and then walk over, and it's much more difficult to try and get a handle on whether that's someone walking over from getting off a bus or from a parking ramp or whatever. So rather than make an estimate of that, we're putting here the numbers that we know are solid numbers and that we can count near the stadium. And there again is just the attendance versus ridership figure. And I would mention only on this that we did go in 2017, from 2016, we're up about 68,000 rides. We've maintained our market share here the last 4 or 5 years at about 12%. And as I mentioned, we want to expand that up to 13% this year. We do have a new marketing campaign. We had to retire the old one. It's been out for a few years. And so here's the new marketing campaign with the Slide into a Slice of Summer by Getting a Ride to the Ballpark campaign. We have a partnership with the Twins that was part of our Target Field Station naming right deal. And we agreed to name the station their Target Field Station. They in turn provide us upwards of about $170,000 in promotional value. And with that promotional value, we have a banner on our the Twins website. We do a lot of social media. We get a radio spot on WCCO for each one of the games. And on the back of that little schedule I handed out, you'll see that we get the backside of that as well with the Metro Transit ad. So those are just some of the things that we get with that partnership that we've had there since Target Field opened. We are going to do what we call Ultra Super Kings on our vehicles. We have radio, and then we do partnership with the Twins for college student night, where we'll provide a free ride to the games, and students can get a $5 standing room ticket on Wednesdays. And that's been a pretty successful partnership in introducing students to both transit and baseball. So here's what a banner looks like behind the plate. We also get these banners as part of our promotional trade, and you'll see these if you're watching the Twins. Ours will pop up there behind the plate, so we get some really good exposure on TV with that. And then to the right side there is the Twins mobile app, and we get a banner ad on that as well. Here's the Ultra Super Kings that I mentioned. So we have 5 of these, one on each one of the buses coming out from our 5 garages, one on the Blue Line train and one on the Green Line train. We also do some radio, as I mentioned, with WCCO. We also have La Raza, which is Spanish language radio. So we have translated some spots into Spanish. And on NPR, we have a 15-second spot as well. And hopefully if I push this button, we'll hear what
Cover all your bases this summer with a ride to Target Field on Metro Transit. Take a bus or hop on Light Rail or North Star for an easy ride to the ballpark. For details, visit metrotransit.org/twins or call 612-373-3333.
So that's an example of the radio spot. Another thing that we do here, these are beverage coasters, front and back side. You see there's a partnership we do with the Growler magazine. So we have these printed. We pay to do the printing and get the front side. The Growler distributes them to I think about 15,000 of these. We're going to be distributed to some of the craft breweries that are located with easy access to good transit to Target Field. So we also are promoting the mobile app on the bottom of that one. I don't know if you can read the fine print though, but that is one of the things we're going to push really hard this year is to make sure people buy their tickets through the mobile app so they're ready to go when they come to either the train or the bus. So that's a brief overview. I'd be happy to try and answer any questions you might have.
Are there questions from committee members? Councilmember Dorfman.
Thank you. Just a quick question. I assume the for overall attendance for the games, do the Twins know where those people are coming from? Because I'm thinking, if there are a lot of them coming from the Southwest Metro, that once Southwest LRT is running, that'll improve.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Council Member, we do work with them to try to identify those lists that they have, like season ticket holder lists and that. And to the extent that they know where those are, they've been pretty willing to share with us. Sometimes people will split up a season ticket, several ways, and they may only know where one of them is or something like that. But yeah, there's ways that we can get at that, and so we certainly do look at that every year.
Councilmember Latowski.
Thank you. The Twins do know that the best way to increase ridership to the station is to be really good. Yeah.
Well, Madam Chair, Council Member,
You talked to him about that?
I tried to put in $1 million for a couple of pictures, but General Manager Lamb wouldn't let me. So I said that wasn't a good public purpose. Yes. Something like that.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions? I do really like the coasters and the slogan. Nice work. Thank you. Next is Quarters of Commerce. Tony Fisher is here to present.
Hello, Chair and committee members. My name is Tony Fisher. I'm a highway planner here with the council staff. And I want to share with you some information about a letter of support that INDOT has requested from the council. It relates to the Quarters of Commerce program. In 2017, the legislature directed dollars to MnDOT to solicit projects from the public. MnDOT is soliciting for $400 million worth of projects. This only applies to state highways, and the legislation did include 8 criteria that MnDOT was required to use to select these projects. So MnDOT is developed this process over the winter and decided to award approximately $200 million to the metro area and approximately $200 million to Greater Minnesota. As part of the project selection process, a letter from an MPO is worth 45 of 700 points, and we do expect that 45 points to be to have meaning in the selection of projects. So as a note, we did submit 10 projects of our own from regional studies here. So what we were looking at to recommend projects for support or not recommend those were 77 projects that we're aware of that MnDOT is scoring. At the end of the day, by the end of April, we expect MnDOT to announce those awards. So I just want to walk through a little bit of the projects that we are drafting up to not support and those that we are proposing to support. Of the 77 projects, we are recommending 59 be supported and 18 not be supported. Of those 18, none were submitted by agency to our knowledge, city or county. Some of the reasons for not supporting some of these 18 projects were places where we had recent investments, recent preservation, mobility, safety investments, where the new project would erase some of that value that's been created. In some cases, we felt that the projects were inconsistent with the TPP or corridor plans that have been developed over time with our partners. In other cases, there are planned improvements for corridor. Those corridors were thoroughly evaluated, and the proposals were inconsistent with the direction of those projects. Some improvements were just really found to be low priorities on certain corridors. And then there were a few proposals of very large improvements that were large investments, large impacts in terms of right-of-way, businesses, residences, and we weren't aware of conversations with the local communities that would show support for those kind of investments and impacts. So the 59 that we have drafted up for support are include 9 in-pass lanes. Those are, in some cases, those are overlapping lanes. There might be a smaller proposal and a larger proposal just to see what's going to score the best in this process. 8 system interchanges, so those are things like 494 35W, other flyovers. 694 35W is another example of that. There were 16 proposals for interchange projects, so converting an intersection to an interchange. A lot of those were individual intersections, but some of them did multiple locations. There were 14 proposals to add lanes to freeways. So those were generally shorter lanes, might be called auxiliary lanes. There were 5 2 to 4 lane expansion projects. We don't have a way to prioritize those, so we're recommending that we support those and let the prioritization process play out to determine the priority for those. And there were a few other ones that didn't really fit in these categories. Shepherd Road was proposed to have a northbound entrance ramp to 35E, just some oddball things like that. So in a number of cases, we intend to support these projects conditionally. Interchanges are required to go through our interchange approval process. That's a joint INDOT and Council HWA group. We do want to have language here about especially lanes on freeways being compatible or building towards in-pass lanes. And then we want to be cognizant of transit advantages that exist or needed in some of these corridors. So that, I'll be answering questions I have.
Thank you. Are there questions from committee members? Councilmember Dorfman.
Just one. Of the 18 projects we're not supporting, are any of those supported by our cities?
To the best of my knowledge, to the best of our knowledge, none of those were submitted by cities or counties. Okay. It's hard to track what their letters of support are going to be just because there's so many cities involved.
Okay. But they weren't local government projects per se, or requests?
Madam Chair and Councilmember, correct. We did have access to the email address that was used to submit those projects, and through that we could tell that it was submitted by.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? I have a possible suggestion or a comment. It strikes me that it's tough because this is a yes/no decision, and so you get all the points or you get none of the points. And it would really be nice if in future quarters of commerce there was some way, maybe at least 3 levels, so that one would be full points because it's one of our priorities, consistent with our studies, our TPP, et cetera. Well, it'd have to be consistent with the TPP, but high priority in the TPP. Mm-hmm. And then the second level would be, it's not inconsistent with our plans, but it's not a priority. And then, no points because it's inconsistent with our TPP. So just some more, as opposed to an all or nothing, some kind of ranking of points or partial points allotment was just something that I thought of. Did you have anything, Director Thompson?
Madam Chair, members, we'll forward that advice to MnDOT. We've submitted a few. I think you might have talked to them about that in the past, but they were kind of stuck by the legislation. I think the cities and counties are also asked to submit letters, and they would like a few gradients in that also. I would just say that the projects, these 59 projects, will probably total well more than $1 billion in projects. It will. Interested to see how this comes out, but it was a rapid process, and appreciate MnDOT taking our feedback where they could, as much as they could in this process that was put on them. So I fully expect there will be another round of quarters of commerce in the future. This is a very popular program at the state legislature, so we'll see what lessons we learn from this round.
Are there any other comments or questions? I have one other question, sorry. For the conditional support, how many projects is that approximately of the 59 that have conditional support?
Madam Chair, I haven't counted it up, but I know in terms of the interchange access approval, those there. And then in terms of freeway expansion, it would also apply to those in terms of being consistent with wind paths, supporting transit advantages.
Okay.
About 40,
Okay.
roughly.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And our last presentation is our travel behavior inventory household survey, and Jonathan is here to present.
These applications.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of
And
the
Mike.
committee. I'm here to give you a brief update on where we are with the travel behavior inventory household survey, which we are really pleased to be in the process of getting started with and not in the process of asking you for money at this point. And just to review, the TBI is a study of household demographics and daily travel activities and transportation patterns. And we use it for two purposes. One, to inform our travel demand forecasting model, which we use for forecasts at all levels, highway transit, regional planning, project development, etc., and to directly inform information about regional transportation planning and performance tracking, and to help us learn about how people travel in the region. We have transitioned from a model of doing the survey every 10 years to doing it every 2 years. This is the first of these every 2-year surveys. We're going to be sampling over the next year 7,500 households, and then after this is our starter wave, and then future waves every 2 years are going to sample about half as many households as the first wave. So what are we doing? We are trying to get information about all of the travel that every member of a household does over the course of a day. And so we want to know every time they leave a building, every time they change address, where they're going. We want to know information about the demographics and vehicle ownership, and as much information as we possibly can about the people making those trips and what trips they're doing, why, by what mode. We're also interested in asking specific questions about topical transportation questions, and to incorporate the existence of modes that didn't exist when we did the survey last time. It's hard to imagine. It's hard to remember that 10 years ago, that 8 years ago in 2010, there were no transportation network companies. There was no bike sharing. There was no car sharing, and there was no BRT in the region. And all of those things are the past 8 years. There's been a lot of change. And the other thing that we're doing is we're changing the technology that we're using to do the survey. Instead of a paper diary, it's expected that the majority of households in the survey are going to be tracking their trips using a smartphone app, which I'll show you later in the presentation. And one thing that it does is it allows us to have more information about trips that people might have otherwise forgotten. And we're expecting to have a much richer data set than we have in the past, but it also makes doing the survey a lot easier and less burdensome. And as a result, instead of doing the survey for 1 day for smartphone participants, we're going to be collecting data from them for 7 days. And so even though we're collecting less data overall over the course of a year than we have in the past once in a decade surveys, in this survey we're expected to, because we're collecting data for 7 days, we're going to have over 5 times as many trips that will be reported. And of course, we're going to have information about their routes through their GPS traces as well. Of course, everybody who participates in the TBI is doing so voluntarily and is giving this information willingly. We'll talk about that a little more in a second, but just to go through the process, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing up front to plan for the survey, and then we're going to be spending a year collecting data for the survey, and you're not going to hear very much from us over that year. Hopefully it will go on automatic, and we'll talk towards the end of that year, and we'll come back and talk about what we've learned. I'm not going to talk about that quite yet, but talking about some of the work that we're doing right now up front to plan for the survey. The difficulty in large household travel surveys always has been that some populations are more willing and able to respond to large, complicated surveys than others. Over the past decades of doing these types of surveys, we have a good sense of what kinds of populations those are. And we have a number of techniques that we are going from the start of trying to reach those. First is especially for populations that we can geographically identify, we're going to be oversampling and inviting more people, assuming a lower response rate. Second, we're going to be doing targeted outreach to communities that to communicate what the survey is, to give people comfort in responding to it, and providing financial incentives to participating in the survey. And third is once we have a household that's agreed to take the survey, we're going to work as hard as we can to make sure that they're able to follow through and actually complete the survey. One of the well-known hard to reach populations are those who don't speak English. Interacting with the survey is difficult if it's not in foreign language. Because of that, we are translating this survey into 5 different languages. We're going to have translated text in all 6 languages, telling people how to participate. The app itself will be available in all 6 of those languages, and for people who speak other languages, we'll have other mechanisms that people can participate. But we're trying to make this as accessible as possible to the largest number of people speaking the largest number of languages and comfortable with the largest number of languages in the region. And we're going to be doing targeted outreach via media, via direct community engagement, community newsletters, every method that we can to get into communities that we expect are going to be harder to reach and potentially more suspicious of the survey, and communicate its importance and communicate the need for this data. And we're going to be doing as much as we can, acknowledging that some of this is really difficult. We are the government asking for very personal data about where people are coming and going over the course of the day, and there are many communities who, for very solid reasons, have reason to distrust, particularly the government. And so we're going to be working as hard as we can, and our consultant team working as hard as they can to alleviate fears about this potential misuse of the data, and also to communicate what this data is being used for. How are we doing this? We are going to, the way the survey itself works is a household will receive an invitation letter. They will, if they're randomly selected to be part of the survey, and an invitation letter will come to their house, and it will invite them to participate in the survey. There are 2 modes that you can participate in the survey. One is, and this is our preferred mode, that you can download, every member of your household with a smartphone can download the ARM app, and they will use it over the course of a week to track all of their travel. And if they're unable to do that because they don't have the necessary smartphones, or because they don't want to participate in that way, a 1-day travel diary, a traditional diary made available to them. If they don't respond, we'll send several waves of reminder postcards to get them into the survey. So this is a demonstration of what the app itself looks like. It will be installed on your smartphone every day. Every time you make a trip, it will record that trip and then ask you, and you can respond either immediately after the trip has been recorded or anytime that day or later in the week, why you stopped at this location, how many members of your household were with you, how many non-members of your household were with you, what mode of travel you used. So that's one piece of survey that you get for every trip. And then we're going to be throwing in a couple of questions every day to get demographic information that over the course of a week will add up to a complete demographic profile of the household. So for example, and then we'll ask some surveys every single day. So every day, we're going to ask people if they, this is a sample, if they received packages at home, if they received packages at work, if they had food delivered to their home, if someone came to their home to do work, trying to get an understanding of trip replacement by home delivery that's we're seeing happening right now. This app automatically runs in the background, records all of your travel, and then also, if it misrecords travel, if it adds a spurious trip, or if this is a short trip you might have made, the survey participant has the opportunity to correct that within the app itself. Uh, it also learns over the course of the week. So if you go to work one day and then come back, and if you go to a place which is your workplace every day at 9 o'clock in the morning, and you do that the second day, on day 3, if you traveled by the same mode and went to the same place, your survey will essentially be already filled in for you, and you'll be able to just confirm that everything's correct or fix it if it isn't. Obviously, not everybody in a household is always going to have a smartphone. Small children small children, even if they have smartphones, are unlikely to be able to use them correctly. Only adults can participate using ARMove, and an adult in a household is given the opportunity through the app to also enter in trips that children make over the course of the day as well. And so through that, we'll be recording through the app, not just travel by smartphone, but through other people in the household as well. And if you're a non-smartphone owning household entirely, you will record all of your travel for a day in a diary, as we have in the past. All of that information will then be collected, and you'll have the opportunity either to enter in the information from your diary on a website, or a call center would call you and get in and retrieve your information over a phone call as well. So that's a brief overview of how the survey works. Where are we right now? You have funded it over the past 2 years. Funding was secured towards the end of last year. This spring, we hired a consultant team. They're under contract, and we've been engaged all spring in survey planning. And as of this week, we've locked down all the basic information for a 400 household pretest, which is going to occur during the month of May. This is going to be 400 households randomly sampled throughout the region, as well as some tests by staff at the council and INDOT to verify our comfort with both the functioning of the application, as well as understanding information about response rates and final testing of the survey. The main survey itself is going to be deployed starting in October of 2018. It's going to October of this year. It will start in October and continue for 12 months. And then every year from that point on, we're going to be doing 1 year on, 1 year off, 1 year of intensive data collection, 1 year of analysis and preparing for the next wave of data collection. Continue with the second wave of household survey in 2021, 2023, and so on. We are at a point where we are excited to begin this new wave, this new method of doing household surveys, and we're excited to see how it goes. I'm happy to entertain any questions at this point.
Are there questions from council members? No? I have a question. Sorry. So it looks like you're mailing to invite specific people based on wanting to get the demographics correct, I would imagine. Are you allowing people to volunteer for it?
No. People who are participating in the survey overall, in order to control for the demographics and to control the response rate and make sure that the sample is random overall, need to be invited to participate. So what we don't want to have happen is to have a call for people to participate, and then for a particular advocacy group or a particular action group to flood us and to try to tamper with the survey itself. That being said, we do foresee particular promotional opportunities where we could invite particular people to participate just to try it out. Their data won't be used as part of our overall data set, but will be something that people can see how this works if they want to see it. And in the pretest, your participation for example, is one of those where we're not necessarily interested in your data, but we're interested in you seeing how the app works, and that itself, because you're not being randomly selected, will not be used itself in the study.
Okay. Not interested in my data. Okay, whatever. Thank you. I was curious, the city of Maple Grove does a citizen survey. It's much smaller in scope, but what they do is they have their key group that they're targeting, and they collect that, and that becomes the valid data. But then they allow people to participate, and they also publish that data. So I didn't know if there was a way to do that or not.
We can consider that as well.
Thank you. Is there anything else? If not, we could be adjourned. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.